Prime Minister, whenever you're ready.
So the motion is that this House would impose an 100% inheritance tax. And on our side, we think this is good. And my model is that at 1 million euros, we'll start taxing an inheritance tax. And this is better as opposed to income taxes because it will drag the economy, because it reduces the incentive to work, because people will see that their work has disappeared. But because it is inheritance tax, it is there's two parties involved, like the person who gives the inheritance and the person who receives it, and the person who receives it does not do the work, so it is less bad than income taxes because it's not directly related to the people, and it's not as it does not reduce the people's working as much. And since the tax is set to higher than 1 million euros, then it wouldn't affect the middle class because they would not be they would usually not be able to have this much money. And it is targeted at higher classes because we want to ensure that people with the same perspectives and the same skills will have the same opportunities and the same choices, and make a more fair and more equal world. And because wealth persistency is very high across generations, even greater than the persistency of income. And this shows that it will create a less equal environment in which people will live, especially if there is many different types of uses that the people want to use the money for. And it is a tax on higher class people mainly, and it helps everyone by redistributing the money. And even though it may not have a very large short-term effect, it will have a long-term effect that equalizes everything, because the tax takes away the inheritance and gives it to people who need that money, and stops the wealth gap from spreading. And it's good to tax if the government depends on the equality of different people and their opportunities. And it's more likely to be better because people who are more skilled will be able to have the same kind of support and the same abilities to stand out and to help the entire government. POI, please.
Hi. Yeah, so you guys talk about how it's going to redistribute the money, but essentially it's going to the government, and there's so many corrupt politicians. So don't you think that that money is just going to get engulfed within the black money system, and essentially the money won't get redistributed, that it'll just contribute to income inequality due to corruption and other such issues?
We think that the government is able to use it either in social services or to put it into things that are benefiting the people, because it wants to support the people, because it depends on these people to support it as well. So if it is a country that is corrupt, it will actually solve this problem, because it takes away the money of the corrupt people, and they will put it into social services or different things like that to help other people and people who need the money more. And since politicians are also under law, it will also work if it's a corrupt government, and it will give people more opportunities and more chances to have a better life. Thank you.
I thank the Prime Minister for that speech. Now, to open the case for the opposition, may I call upon the Leader of Opposition.
I'll incorporate rebuttals to the PM speeches in my own speech. But first, I believe that it is principally unfair to those who have worked so hard over the years, not only for themselves, but for their family, for their children, for the people they care about. It is the human instinct to provide for their family and their friends after their day. Now, people who have worked half their lives to that end, you're not going to take it away from them. You're not going to take their life goals We're not going to take the objective of their working so hard away from them. That is unfair. Not only to these people, not only to these workers whose life's work has now been taken away by the government's motion, but also to their children. It is a fact universally acknowledged and accepted that money generates money and that the amount of inheritance positively correlates with lifetime earnings. So now you're going to take away the chance of these children to be wealthy. You're going to take away the chance of these children to be high achieving earners. Now, I believe that the main victim of these government's policy would be middle class families. Why? 1 million euros is not a lot of money in this economy. Now, middle class families, they normally earn like maybe $100,000, 100,000 euros per year, and maybe over 40 years, over 50 years of their working life, before retirement and after graduating, they will earn like a few million euros, and they will save perhaps 1 or 2 million euros. Now, they're going to pay all of this savings to the government's coffers, but the wealthy are not. Why? The wealthy have an armory of tax avoidance tactics in their hands. Now, they can discuss inheritance as gifts. When they grow old, they're going to slowly move their assets to their children. So like Trump has a lot of apartments in New York. Now he's slowly transferring these apartments as so-called gifts to his children. Now there's an apartment valued at 7 million. The market price is 7 million. But Trump paid off a financial agency to undervalue this apartment. So it's valued at 300,000. So he had to pay a gift tax, which is very, very low compared to the actual value of the apartment. So the wealthy, they can pay agencies, experts, and even government officials. They can bribe them to undervalue the assets. So that at the end, the proportion of the assets they're going to pay to the government is going to be way, way, way lower than the upper middle class families I'm talking about, which are more harmed by this government's motion than the ultra wealthy, the billionaires, the trillionaires. So right, if all else fails, they're going to use bribery, corruption, and intimidation to force the government to allow them to transfer their assets one way or another to their children. So third, this government's motion will lead to social and economic instability. Why? First, now, the older folks, the upper middle class people, they're now disincentivized to save money for their children because they can't. So like for every cent in their bank now, after they die, is 1 cent lost to the government. They have no incentive, they have no reason to save money. So right, they're going to spend millions of euros, they're going to spend hundreds of thousands of euros in their banks to use it all. That's the only point of it. They're spending it for the heck of it. So there'll be a massive inflation. There'll be an explosion in demand without the corresponding increase in supply. What does this lead to? Hyperinflation. All right. So second, there'll be no incentive for middle class young people to excel. So right, so they know when you go over 1 million euros, when your assets go over this limit, you're gonna be screwed over by the government, right? So there is no incentive to work hard, like long hours. I've known of bankers who work like 14 to 16 hours a day to like reach high levels of personal net worth. So right, this is gonna be all destroyed. They're not gonna work so hard anymore. So this will adversely affect our economy. So when this leads to social instability. But before I continue, is there any PYs?
Do you think the only incentive for parents to work is to give their money to the children?
Sorry, again?
Do you think the only incentive for parents working is to give their money to the children?
This is one of the main incentives. So right, you're going to think that, yes, I'm going to work, but I'm not going to work so hard as to go over this 1 million limit because I know that if I go over this limit, I'm going to be screwed by the government. So I'm not going to save so much either because I'm just going to maintain at this level. And if they are hit by a recession or an economic crisis, they're going to be screwed because they don't have this much savings presently. So right, there are going to be massive protests by the people. Why? You see, right, the French government has initiated an increase in the pension age from 62 to 64. And this, they are taking away of 2 years worth of pensions has led to massive protests by millions of people. massive strikes by government workers, private sector workers, and how does it compare to taking away a lifetime's worth of savings and earnings? It's nothing. There are going to be massive strikes. There'll be an economic shutdown for the entire economy. There will never be peace again in our country. So this is why I believe that we cannot impose a 100% inheritance tax on our people.
I thank the Leader of Opposition for that speech. Now to continue the case for the government, may I call upon the Deputy Prime Minister.
So in today's debate, we're proud to propose a topic that this House would impose 100% inheritance tax on 1 million euro tax. And in today's debate, I'm going to do three things. First, I'm going to provide rebuttal to my opponent's argument. Then I'll rebuild my party's argument, and then lastly, I'll provide my own argument and why we think that we have won this clash. And now moving on to my rebuttal, which is that my opponents have been saying that it is actually very unfair because we should not have taken away the taxes and have not taken away the money just because of lucky ones and they seem to be rich. We disagree with that because we think, although my opponents might say that every person in the world is born in different conditions and the society can't punish the luckiest one, inside it must provide opportunities for the less fortunate ones. However, we disagree because we think inside the circumstance, that is what the government could only do, and what the government could do is to take away part of the luckiest ones, and so that they can still keep their opportunities, and which could help the society get better, and it could actually help the less fortunate ones become more fortunate and give them even more opportunity without affecting them largely. And my opponents have also said that actually this is very unfair, and however disagree with that because I think inside this circumstance, the poor people, they need to get help, and the only way is that the government would turn the taxes into funds that will help the poor people. And now moving on to my rebuilding, which is that my partner have been saying that actually the human instinct makes people and makes the fact that actually it wouldn't affect the middle class and instead it would affect the higher class, which is what we want to say, which is then this is very important because we think that this would affect the higher class, which would not actually affect them very much. And we believe that the major problem of this situation is that the fact of capitalism of these rich people being so rich is that the people would only hope inheriting large amounts of inheritance, which would bring too much advantages, so they stop working. And this would also be an impact to the poorer societies because they would also stop working because they see that the higher classes, they seem to be improving and they have no hope of improving too. And now moving on to my own argument, which is that actually capitalism brings people inheriting large amounts of inheritance, which would bring too much advantages, so they would stop working. And this is a situation of meritocracy. And though my opponents might say that if meritocracy is the main concern, then there should be no inheritance given, and inheritance should be outlawed. And we disagree with that because we think inside this situation, it is still our burden to defend that. We still want the rich people and the lower classes to have a good life. So which is why we support that the inheritances should exist. But we think that actually the richest, they should contribute so that the situation would be avoided and so that they could help the ones that are inside less advantage and they're less unfortunate. And we think that we want this clash because we believe inside the situation and 100% inheritance tax above 1 million euros, the society would be more meritocratic and it would be better ensure the equality of opportunity. And now I would like a POI from my opponents.
You guys talk about how it's going to only impact the higher classes, but this motion applies to everyone from lower class to middle class to the upper class. You cannot just target it to the higher class. So it's making the poor poorer, and so isn't that increasing income inequality rather than helping?
In fact, it is the fact that we are targeting actually the higher class because the higher class, they have the responsibility of contributing because we do not want a society where people, especially rich people, they only want to continue their inheritance and they stop working, which would always impact the lower classes too. And we believe that although we are mainly targeting the higher class, we are still trying to benefit everyone, which is why inside this motion, actually the inheritances, they're still allowed because we still want people to benefit, and which is why we think that inheritance is not out loud inside this situation. And continuing my speech, which is that we win this clash because in 100 inheritance tax above 1 million euros, the society will become more meritocratic, and it would actually ensure equality of opportunity because if the government thinks that they don't have the obligation of smaller, then the rich people would be the only ones that will contribute it, because our main goal and our larger impact is that we make a society more equal by lessening the gap between the wealth gaps, and which is why we think that we're proud to proposed. Thank you.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister for that speech. Now, to wrap up the top half of the debate, may I call upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition.
Living in a world where developing countries are going to remain developed and no actual incentive in actually enhancing the development of the country is a world that side government is trying to ensure in today's debate. So, ladies and gentlemen, firstly, side government has always been trying to tell you on how they are only going to implement this motion towards these individuals that are earning more than 1 million euros. But why we see this statement as discriminating is because even if they are saying that this implementation is going to affect the higher classes, but understand that these middle classes families are also going to be affected. Why? Because throughout their working years, right, they have been working hard, and it is not impossible that they are going to earn more than 1 million euros, meaning that for example, you have to pay tax, you have to pay for your house, and you have to pay for your car, and etc. Meaning that all these things, all these liabilities are already eating up their money, already eating up the 1 million euros, and etc. Meaning that in the end of the, meaning that actually the money that these families are actually gaining is actually not 1 million euros, but they keep on trying to tell you on how how it is simply just going to affect the higher classes without actually seeing the actual effect that they are going to bring to the middle classes. Next, understand that we believe on side opposition on how we bring more fairness to not just to these people. Why? Because firstly, we see that it might be against the person's will to just simply put these taxes just for the government. Why? Because we tell you that the reason on why they specify which relatives are going to get which part of their money or which part of their inheritance is probably because of these relatives are the ones that took care of them, or because these relatives simply deserve them in a way that they believe so. Meaning that it is simply unfair for the government to simply take all this money that these people have been working hard for. And next, secondly, on how it basically just brings to an economical jeopardy, um, Why? Because we tell you that um, for example, right, these people aren't actually able to live. Why? Because they are not actually going to have enough money. Like, for example, let me give you an example, right? Living in a family where only one parent is a working parent and the other one stays at home, right? Like, for example, the parent that is working passed away, and this parent's earning is above 1 million euros as implemented by state government, and next the government is simply going to take all this money, leaving no money at all to the parent that stayed at home taking care of their children, meaning that in the end of the day, these children or this family is going to go broke, meaning that there's no actual guarantee that these people can actually live in today's world. Why? Because we tell you that education needs money, food needs money. You need money to get the basic life needs. Meaning that in the end of the day, side government's motion is simply a motion that is discriminating the people. Before I proceed, NPOIs. 3, 2, 1. Next, moving on to my next point, which is a life betterment. Understand that when these people get the money, right? They are going to focus on the betterment of their children, the younger generation, because they know what it feels like to not have money. Meaning that we believe that they are going to be a much more responsible people. They are not just going to like spend money recklessly, meaning that they are going to invest this money in their children's life for the betterment of these children's life, meaning that these children will actually have a better chance at thriving in life rather than what side government is trying to do, which is just taking all this money for the government. And next, we tell you on why the implementation of this motion is irrational. Why? Because we believe that there are still governments out there existing just because they want money to misuse the tax money and etc. We believe that these type of politicians or these types of governments still exist, meaning that we don't see on how these money are actually going to be used to develop these countries and etc., or actually going to use in a correct sense for the people and for the betterment of the country, which is why we tell you that it is not valid for the government government to just simply take all this money that these people have been working hard for, rather than just giving it to the family who actually deserves it. And with all these reasons, I have never been prouder to oppose. And with that, I rest my case. Thank you.
I thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Now may I call upon the Member of Government to begin the debate in the lower house.
The whole opening half misses the incentive of these children. We see on opening government, we don't see why the government is incentivized to give the money to the poor. We'll provide why they're incentivized, right? And we don't see why or any examples of why the government would decrease the income gap in between high class, middle class, and low class. And we don't see how the money will get redistributed. And so we'll provide that in our extension, right? In this speech, I'll be doing a couple of things. I'll be providing our burden on how to win this debate, a characterization, a rectification, and an extension, right? The burden for our team is that we have to prove that the income tax promotes dependency rather, promotes dependency, promotes independency, sorry, and to characterize the world a little bit. We believe that on side opposition, we're going to see a world where the poor will just stay poor, then the rich will just get richer. And we'll say why we just don't want this, right? To go into the refutation, right? We already told you that open government just misses a lot of analysis on why the government is incentivized to give money to the poor, right? And we'll provide this later on in our extension. We don't see why or any examples of why the government would decrease the income gap, and we don't see how the money will get redistributed, and we'll just provide that later on. The previous speakers, they say, okay, we believe from what we get from their extension or their argument and extension is that it's family over society in the whole world, and they're promoting rich just gets richer, poor gets poor. And we would also like to ask them, what are the children's incentives, right? Because on our side, we already know that the government is going to use these for better purposes, and again, we'll explain why, but we just don't see how the children are going to use this money, if they're going to use it well, and at the end, is this worth it? Is this worth all the hours that their parents spent working at their jobs, right? We also believe that, okay, parents know their child the most, right? And parents, we believe that parents could be incentivized, not give their child the hard-earned money because the child could just use it horribly, right? And is that really worth it? Again, is it fair for the parents and how much they spent working, right? And the second speaker, they come with the point, we just don't see why the government is incentivized to keep the money to themselves. Like they say time and time, okay, the government is going to use it horribly, but we don't see any incentives of why the government is going to keep it to themselves, because the government is going to have to get re-elected. And to get re-elected, you have to get the public's appeal, right? And in order to get the public's appeal, you have to use the money, the tax. The purpose of tax is to literally give it to the society, to build upon and develop society. And that is the incentive of why the government is going to use this inheritance tax well, right? But we don't see why the government is incentivized to keep the money to themselves on opposition side, right? And don't you agree that children will spend the money more irrationally because they wouldn't have to work for the rest of their adulthood, right? They don't understand the feeling of not having money. So we believe that they're just incentivized to spend their money more irrationally, and we just don't want that in our world, right? But to go into the before I even go on, is there any POIs?
So since you said that these children are going to simply just spend all this money irrationally, don't you think that these children are actually going to provide these children are actually going to have a better life? Because in the end of the day, these money are actually going to be allocated for the lives of their betterment themselves.
Okay. What do you think? Okay, here's a question. Do you think that the children are actually gonna, okay, for a better life, you have to use the money well, but what if the children just use it on crack and drugs and alcohol, right? We don't, like, what if they use it horribly? And that's just a question we would like to see answered, right? To go into the extension of reliability, right? We see a little bit of this in the opening half, but we would like to push this even more. Parents aren't forever. They pass away, and children will have to work for themselves at the end of the day. And here's a couple of facts in this world. One, children don't know the income of parents, right? And two, children just know to some extent that the money will be used on the children and only them, right? And this causes tons of reliability already. And what promotes this even more is the inheritance tax, right? Children know they'll inherit the money. What demotes this even more is the inheritance tax, right? Children know they'll inherit the money, and they wouldn't have to work as much after the parents passed away. And what society promotes is independence. We want you to work for yourself. And what parents are doing is literally giving the money away completely to the children, even when they know that, okay, well, they could use it on drugs, alcohol, they could use it on something that completely just doesn't make sense or is used horribly. And we don't see this on our side, right? Because the government is already incentivized to use the money well. And let's look at the biggest company in Korea, Samsung, right? One of the sons in Samsung attend my school, right? And just at looking at him, he doesn't really care about his grades. I wonder why. It's because he knows he'll inherit the money anyways from his parents, and grades don't affect him, right? He doesn't work as hard, and just high class in general, they won't work as much. They rely on their parents' money, and this isn't the money they earn, right? So the question is, when the inheritance money runs out, what will happen to these children, right? They're already so used to relying on their parents, on the money that they're inheriting, that these children just won't work and they won't know what to do afterwards. In our side, children are a little bit more desperate. They're more independent. They have the need to work. And not only that, we just don't know the incentives of children. We don't know how they will use the money. Maybe they'll use the money on charity, right? But we already know. We know for sure that on our side, the government is going to use it since it's tax, right? They're going to use it on society. They're going to use it on public transportation, education. And that is a fact in this debate. And this is why we win and we take over. Very proud to propose.
I thank the member of government for that speech. Now I'm going to call upon the member of opposition to open the closing opposition case.
We strongly oppose this motion. Inheritance is not only money left by an individual after they pass, but it is also other assets such as real estate and businesses that they leave behind to an individual or a group. By passing this motion, the entire inheritance will be given to the government. So now we have 4 main points that we will be talking about. A will is a legal document left by a person stating how their possessions and assets are to be divided or given. Inheritance is a part of the will. This motion would therefore declare wills null. Taking away the right of a will and giving the government all of the money is essentially going against the concept of democracy. A lot of people earn money essentially for their family to have a high standard of living, especially large business tycoons. If their money is given to the government, they will be driven to shift into other countries, essentially taking their economy elsewhere. Many wealthy individuals also choose to donate their money for the greater good, such as donating their entire or part of their inheritance to charities or good causes. By passing this motion, you are taking away money and resources away from people who are actually in genuine need of it. You are taking away their chances of bettering their lives. Instead, this money would be taken by some politician or would enter the black market if it would be taken as tax. All the hard work and effort made by ancestors to earn money and pass it down to their descendants is essentially wasted. Why should the government get to steal money from people who have died? And the whole concept of family support is lost, and the government, who does not have any right to impose 100% tax, which means all the money that is inherited is gone. Even if the government takes this money away, which is morally unjust, let's talk about where it would go. The government is corrupt. Why should a complete stranger receive the money made by a person rather than their own family members? If the money is allocated to the government, it will probably become part of corruption and the black market system. Many corrupt politicians and people in power already eat up tax money paid by citizens for their own benefits and to increase their own net worths, instead of using the money for what is actually meant, improving the lives of citizens and developing the nations. So what is stopping these politicians from taking away this inheritance tax too? Middle-class families are largely impacted by this policy. It can put them into poverty, essentially, and impacting the development of the country. Middle-class families often pass down property and businesses, etc., to their descendants. If the government takes these properties away, it can make them homeless. This increases the rate of poverty while subsequently hurting the economy and the country. As for businesses, they will be converted they will not be nationalized from a private company if the government takes them away. Many successful business owners leave their enterprises to family or people that they know can run the firm. The government usually does not have business expertise and could run the business into a complete loss. This would mean that many jobs would be lost, and the company that actually helps people and the economy will now no longer exist. Now, I would like to open the floor to any POIs.
How can you be certain that the money would be entirely swallowed up by the government?
So many in the government, there are many corrupt politicians and people in power who anyways take up income tax and use it for their own benefit. Therefore, what do you think would stop them from taking away this tax, which would probably be very great if a lot of these wealthier people, if they take away a lot of these wealthier people's inheritance tax, which would also increase the wealth gap in the country even further if these people are now the wealthier people in the country because they could take away this inheritance tax. Okay, so now I would like to recap the opening opposition's points. So they mentioned that many people spend their many years earning to provide for their family, so that takes away the objective of their life's work, and it also takes away the chances of their children being wealthy and successful, and this severely impacts the lives of middle class people. And many wealthy and corrupt people can also bribe the government for assets such as real estate, and which would further increase the wealth gap. And this also would cause a lot of social and economic instability in a country, as there's no reason for people to save money. So then they would spend all of their money, which would lead to a massive inflation. And there's no incentive for middle class people to work hard anymore, which would impact the economy. And there would also be massive strikes that we saw when the French government increased the age for pension. Thank you.
I thank the member of opposition for that speech. Now to wrap up the government bench, my call from the government.
So I'm not sure why opposition is framing these middle class as spending all their money before they're dead, because we believe that there are many other incentives of these people other than just earning money. We believe that they have their own passions, aspiration. They also care about their reputation. That's why they're working. We don't think that the reason why they're working is just because of money. And it's not likely that they're going to spend, because like even if these billionaires in the status quo who already have a lot of like money for like the generation below, like mostly a lot of like generation below, these billionaires are still working. The reason why they're working is because the reason why they're working is because of other kind of incentives other than money. We don't think that middle class people will just spend and just middle class people will just spend money and just be dead because they can't inherit the money to their children. So before I move on to questions, I would like to respond to like open opposition. So we believe that open opposition is only benefiting the rich, and we believe that because we told you the children don't have the incentive to work because of their parents. We believe that we told you that children don't have the incentive to work because the parents can inherit the money, and we believe this directly clashes with their arguments. And also in terms of the previous speaker, we believe that the reason why government isn't corrupt is because the government system is very transparent. People can see how the government spend their government revenue is used, and if the government spends a lot of money using the money for their own good use, then people will know. And we believe that because they want to be elected and re-elected, as we told you, we believe that that's the incentive why government wouldn't use that money for corruption. And we believe that if that was the case, then all of the tax in the status quo wouldn't be used for public services. And we believe that, as we can see in the status quo, this tax is used very like efficiently, and in the public, like in public services like healthcare or education, we believe that that system is really efficient in the status quo. So they talked about how middle class will be in poverty. We told you that we're helping them by giving the education and housing, and we believe that middle class won't just go bankrupt because their parents will give all the money to the government, because government will redistribute the lot of money that they will get. We believe that government can also fund that into education and housing and help those people and welfare who can't afford housing. So first, we move on to questions about which side is able to help the poor people. We believe that we're able to reduce inequality by government funding on the services like healthcare and education services. And we told you that, different from the open government, we told you that it is not about just the inheritance tax, but it's also about the other opportunities that these poor people lack, like education and healthcare services, and how we're able to give those kind of opportunities to people by collecting these government revenue and by collecting this tax and by giving to these poor people. So we believe that we're actually helping the poor people by actually getting the money and redistributing the money to the other population. And my second question is about which side is able to help the society. So we told you that there's a lot of transparency in the government, and government cannot just use the money for corruption. And we believe that, as we told you, children is not always responsible. And we also told you that in our side, children is more desperate and they are more independent in our side. They can work much more better because they know that they can't just inherit children. I mean, they can't just inherit money from their parents. And we believe that this is also relevant to the poor people, because we believe that the whole population will be more desperate and working on trying to get more jobs, because in the other side, we believe that like a lot of the population will just rely on their parents. I'd like to get a P1.
So we believe that on our side, the relatives that are going to receive this inheritance money are not just the children. Their spouse, their siblings are still considered as the relatives that can receive this inheritance money.
Yeah, I think that's like basically the same thing. So we believe that even if they're also inheriting the money to their relatives, it's also that it's not their only incentive to work. They have other incentives like caring about their reputation, and they also have passions for their work. They just don't give up because they have enough money to just they have enough money. We believe that like the reason why a lot of rich people are still working is because they have other kind of like other kind of incentives other than just giving the money to their children, even though they have like enough money for their children in the status quo. So we believe that we're also helping the poor because we're actually making a fair grounds where poor people can be more hopeful that they can start on new things, because in the status quo they're really hopeless. They don't really have the incentive because they know that rich people already have much more benefits before they even like start. So for these reasons, I'm very proud to propose.
I thank the government whip for that speech. Now may I call upon the opposition whip to wrap up the debate.
We strongly oppose this motion. Before we begin, let's define what inheritance tax is. It means that taking away 100% of what descendants inherit in terms of assets such as real estate, businesses, income, etc. Our opposition states this motion will only be applied to people who own over 1 million euros. However, this motion addresses the entirety of the population and cannot be modified to target only the upper class. That is not the topic of debate. Therefore, it is making the poor poorer and therefore increasing income inequality, completely turning their argument to our side. They talk about how it redistributes money. This is not at all true, because due to corrupt political systems, the businesses, money, etc. inherited from civilians will be eaten up by morally unjust, corrupt politicians. The opening government stated that even corrupt politicians would have to pay inheritance tax. However, that is only after they pass away. So it technically does not affect the corrupt politicians, but rather only their descendants. And therefore, it does not stop them from being corrupt. Thirdly, the opposition government states that it reduces the incentive to work. Currently, no country in the world charges 100% inheritance tax. Yet, everybody who has the opportunity is working. Even the world's biggest tycoons, such as Mukesh Ambani, their children are working and conducting multiple different businesses. This proves that it is not making people lose the incentive to work. You're going to inherit money and assets from your parents. Does that mean that you don't have any plan to work and to take up a job? No. So clearly, it does not impact the laziness and the working incentives of children. Additionally, by allowing the government to inherit businesses from families, it is taking away work as the ownership transfers to the state, and generations of the family's hard work is taken away from the family, which uh, which completely modifies the aim of and incentive of the government. Moving on, they talk about how it promotes independency. However, it does not promote independency. Rather, it promotes poverty as you take away businesses, real estate from families. Wouldn't you rather have a higher standard of living in a country and lesser poverty rather than just having a higher rate of independency? The CG talks about how politicians won't be corrupt and how all these taxes are going to be redistributed and it's going to go back to the middle class and the lower class. However, that is not true, because essentially it's going to be eaten up by the corrupt political system, as we can see with taxes that are already being imposed right now. Now I'll open the floor to any POI.
So don't you think that even the society would hint them that actually they don't need to work because the high people that are always hired and they don't need to contribute anything to the society?
No, because like we mentioned, the upper class is going to pass on their businesses to their other descending generations, and they're going to carry forward the businesses as we've seen in generations of business tycoons. So now moving on, let's wait. The opposition's only argument is that children become lazy and the rich become poor as the money is redistributed. What they fail to understand is that even the middle class is being impacted. The government is taking the houses and businesses away from them, and they will not provide anything back due to corruption and due to the money being engulfed in other projects. If I tell you I will take your house due to inheritance tax, but in the near future you receive few benefits, would you be content? No, it'll lead to revolts and poverty within the lower middle class, and it'll lead to people from the upper class moving to other countries where such ridiculous laws do not exist, and where they can pass on their inheritance to their children. Now, I'm going to move on to summarizing our own arguments. To summarize our entire argument, by passing this motion that imposes 100% of inheritance tax, you are taking away the right of a will and going against democracy. Ultimately, these are the first steps towards changing the type of government from democracy to something more authoritative and dictatorship-wise. Many wealthier individuals also choose to donate their inheritance to improve the lives of people in need, but that opportunity will be taken away from them. This motion would also negatively impact the middle class. The fewer properties and assets passed down to children being taken away could result in their homelessness, and by taking all inheritance, the government takes away businesses, nationalizing them. This means that they change it from a state of private enterprise to a state of public enterprise, which also increases corruption as there are more loopholes that can be passed through. Without business expertise to run the firm, they would go into loss, severely impacting jobs plus the economy. Many politicians steal tax for their own benefits instead of using it for the development of the country. So what says that they won't do the same to the inheritance tax? Lastly, many people work their entire lives to support their families and make sure they have a comfortable life. So what's the point if they can't do that? Hence, we proudly oppose. Thank you.
I thank the opposition whip for that speech. Now, anyone who's not an adjudicator, please leave the room and wait for the results.